couple of years ago, I was teaching on a Sunday evening from a park in Oceanside, California, on the anniversary of my wife and I's anniversary, August 9th, and had a complete and total breakdown right there during a live session, but was able to pull it back together and complete the practice. I've had that happen to me twice and embarrassed me. And both times, my therapist, when I saw her the next time, she goes, "Max, that was great." I go, "What do you mean that's great?" She goes, "I don't watch your stuff, but I heard about it. There were others that saw it in the mental health community. And the fact that you were that vulnerable gives other people permission, and please keep it up."
You are listening to No Stigma Nevada, an original podcast where Nevadans can listen to and discuss issues of mental health in the Silver State. I am your host, Kim Pelchikoff, an award-winning journalist who has lived with bipolar disorder for over 30 years. I am the third generation in my family to live with a mental illness. I don't just report on it, I live it. The point of this podcast is to educate, discuss, and to address issues of stigma that all too often keep those needing help from getting it. 6 years to the day before his swearing in at the Nevada Capitol, Nevada Assemblyman Max Carter's wife of 31 years died after being thrown from her horse in a freak accident. The traumatic event led to a lengthy, severe depression, which took him years to overcome. While many high-profile politicians choose to keep their mental health battles private, Assemblyman Carter, a former union organizer who represents Las Vegas District 12, hopes that being open about his mental health issues will help combat the stigma often associated with mental health. He'll tell you that he treated his depression with years of various therapies and therapists, including antidepressants, equine therapy, EMDR, and trauma-informed yoga, which he now teaches weekly on Sundays on Instagram. But he says it was his multiple ketamine treatments that finally brought him on the road to inner peace and an inspiration for his current sponsoring of Bill SB 242, a Senate bill proposing the research of psychedelic mushrooms for use in treating psychiatric illnesses. Before we get to your personal story, can you tell me about some of the main bills that you are supporting? I know the Senate 242 is a big one.
Senate 242, the psilocybin bill. Yes, I'm very involved in that one. I'm also carrying a debt collection bill to a small one that requires when you pay off a debt for the debt collector to give you a payoff letter. And that, again, that's personal experience because I had a medical debt going clear back to around the time my wife died. I paid off because I was trying to get a mortgage, and I paid them $1,500, said, "Hey, I need a payoff letter." And after I got done arguing with them, they finally said, "Well, if you come into our office, we can make you one for $10 a piece." And there were 3 accounts. And I'm like, "You just got $1,500 out of me, and you're going to hold me hostage for another $30. So I've got a debt collection bill. I've got a pension equity bill. I've got the human composting bill. So that's the one that most people want to talk about.
Well, I think the one you just mentioned is really fascinating. Can you explain a little bit more about this debt collector's bill? Why can't they just give you a letter once you pay off your debt?
I honestly don't know. And all I really needed was something as simple as a receipt. And I was like, "Can you email me a receipt?" They go, "No." And it says, "Well, can I pay the money over the line?" They said, "No, you have to come into our office." And they said, "Well, in 2 to 3 months, it'll be off of your credit record." I'm like, "I'm in escrow. I need to show this is cleared now." And they didn't care. So that made me talk to some people and found out that, yes, this is an issue. And I worked with some experts, some lawyers from the Nevada Justice Association, and crafted it to where if you request it, they have to provide it within 10 business days, or else you've got a legal right of action against them, which gets companies' attention because they don't want to be sued.
I mean, do they really need the $10? What is that all about?
Exactly. And it's not all debt collectors, but there's a subset, just like in any business, that their whole business model is to squeeze every penny they can get out of you. They buy these debts at sometimes pennies on the dollar and then charge you fines and fees, because I got hit with that also. I says, dude, this is double what the original debt was. And this was for the anesthesiologist bill while my wife was in the hospital dying. It was over double. And I go, I got the original ELB. They said, well, we're allowed to charge any fees, fines, and interest we want to, which I since found out is a lie. So some of their business models is all about squeezing every penny they can out of you. And, usually you're calling them when you're trying to, get a loan, or, and a lot of mine were all medical debts. And they treat you like a criminal no matter what that debt's about. And it's not right.
What bill is that?
AB 223.
What kind of support is it getting?
It got voted out of committee unanimously. It's gotten bipartisan support. So I really think it stands a good chance. We'll see when it goes over to the Senate.
Well, that sounds like a great bill because, as you know, a lot of times people who are experiencing mental health issues, they have medical bills to pay or they have debts to pay because they're not necessarily working all the time.
You're vulnerable.
And you're vulnerable. Absolutely. Tell me a little bit more about Senate 242. I think that's getting a lot of attention, and it's being examined in other states as well as Nevada.
It is. I personally have benefited from ketamine therapy. Ketamine therapy is currently, I believe, I'm not positive, but I think it's the only FDA-approved psychedelic type therapy. It helped me get to a point where I'm in a good place up here. I went through about 9 or 10 sessions after the election. The slowdown after the election really got to me. I had some major depressive episodes and was not in a good place in early January. And my psychiatrist, we started working with ketamine therapy. It made a huge difference. It created those breakthroughs that we all talk about and that the mental health world talks about. And I still remember the main one, and I was embarrassed when it happened. But both my psychiatrist and my talk therapist were both, no, Max, that's good. We're glad this is finally happening. It created that breakthrough, and I don't mind talking about that. I came out of, the ketamine session, and you're about half groggy. The first thing that come out of my mouth is, I don't have to perform for you. And I was like, why did you just say that? And then I followed that up immediately, very forcefully with, I don't have to perform for, and I said my therapist's name, my talk therapist's name. And then once I finally was thinking, as you come out of those, you come back and all of your inhibitions start coming back slowly. All of that negative self-talk doesn't come back fully, but it starts coming back in. And I started to apologize to my psychiatrist for what I said. And she's like, no. This is what we were hoping for. This is what we've been looking for. She says, you're finally realizing that you're not here to please me or your talk therapist. You're not here to perform for us. You're here to work with us. We're here to help you. You're here to be honest. And she says, that was huge, that coming out of your mouth. You're finally realizing you don't have to perform. There's no expectations, no things that you had to live up to go to your therapist. It's not a job.
I know ketamine is a big one right now. It's considered an alternative to regular antidepressant medications. For this depression that you talked about, did you try other medications besides ketamine?
I've been on, the stereotypical SSRI journey, finding out that having them cause bad side effects. Finally found, one that seems to be working for me, an SNRI. But that actually took finally my therapist telling me a story. I had one of those DNA tests that could spot which ones your liver can and can't metabolize. And that helped narrow it down. Found out that one of them that I'd been on for a long time, my body, it really wasn't doing much because my body just couldn't metabolize it properly. And I'm still on 2 SNRIs currently. So it didn't replace it. It just was an adjunct. It worked with my psychiatrist. It works with it.
Mm-hmm. So the connection between ketamine and the SB 242, can you talk about that a little bit? Or is this an opportunity to expand the market in terms of what's available to individuals?
Ketamine is not really a psychedelic. It's more of a dissociative. From what I've read and what my therapists have told me, that antidepressive effects of ketamine are measured in weeks, sometimes months, where the antidepressive after effects of psilocybin are measured in months and sometimes years. And also where I went through 8 to 10 ketamine sessions, probably would have went through 2 psilocybin sessions. So it's much more effective in the sessions, and it's much more persistent with its antidepressive effects.
So what exactly are you proposing with that bill? I know you're one of the co-sponsors. Is it to do more research that replicates what they kind of are doing in other states? Is it to create places where people can go under medical supervision? Is it to decriminalize people owning it?
It started off with empowering studies, making it to where studies could be done in our state legally. And I would have loved to have been able to make it to where it was legal for licensed practitioners to use it in their therapy in this state, but we're not there yet because of its class 1 status with the federal government. So we're not quite there yet. So the bill was designed to make it to where you could participate, doctors could participate or start clinical trials. They would have to be approved, but through the federal process, but just to where we could bring some of that research to our state, and also to decriminalize growth and possession of small quantities. Recognizing, like the journey that cannabis took to legalization, that we don't need to keep creating people with criminal records over something that should have never been a class 1 to begin with.
What kind of support is that bill getting?
Okay, publicly, that bill got massive support. There was somewhere around 100 people that showed up to testify and support, everything from a retired police officer who's also a minister that talked about how it finally was that psilocybin treatment was what finally released him from the effects of PTSD, the anger that he had inside of him from his years of being a police officer, to young people that had, and everything in between. The public defender, John Pirro, testified in favor of it because he's a veteran. And most of the studies have been done with veterans or law enforcement personnel and showing, because they're the ones with the highly identifiable PTSD symptoms. And it's showing great promise there. And so massive support. The only opposition was from law enforcement. I think there were 2 or 3 police agencies that testified against it. And I think the District Attorneys Association testified against it. And then the Psychiatric Association testified against it.
I think we did. Yeah, I actually remember that.
Yeah, and it was based on the childhood psychosis thing, which, in my personal opinion, they cite the rise in childhood psychosis from getting hold of their parents' cannabis. And to me, I'll say it, I think it's a bit of a disingenuous argument when we have more children die from acetaminophen poisoning than we do from anything else. The problem that's being described isn't a decriminalization issue. It's not even a psilocybin issue, and it's a storage issue. And it's, to me, the argument's a little bit disingenuous. If it was really about that, why isn't the Psychiatric Association trying to get acetaminophen banned?
So, as far as your colleagues are concerned, I mean, where do you see this going with other members of the committees? Do you think this is going to pass?
It's been severely watered down. The decriminalization portion got taken out, and now it's setting up an interim study group that's supposed to report back to the next legislature with evidence-based recommendations for appropriate legislation in 2 years. So, am I overjoyed by that? No, but we got to start somewhere. And I'm a firm believer that we don't throw it away. Let's not stomp our feet and get mad. Let's say, okay, let's embrace this. This is what this body has the comfort level to do when it comes to policy. So let's do it. And when we come back in 2025, we can have a better informed discussion about it.
So just to be clear, this Senate Bill 242, it's for research on mental health, the applications of this particular form of mushroom for mental health reasons, or is it in general for all?
That's what it's targeted at. I haven't read the amendment, but that's what I've been told it is. I skimmed it, and I apologize that I'm not better up on the exact language that's in the amendment, but I know it creates a study group. One member of the majority in both houses, one member of the minority from both houses, and then I believe that there's a couple of people from the psychiatric world, and I believe the governor gets an appointment. I'm not really sure, but it does set up a board like that to come back with recommendations.
You're so open about your own mental health struggles. And as we know, U.S. Senator John Fetterman also has been very public about his situation with depression, which he didn't have to be. A lot of politicians, if they're struggling with mental health issues, they just kind of disappear for a few weeks or a month and nobody knows what happened to them. They have quote unquote medical concerns, but they don't come out and actually state what they were. What effect do you think that has on the public? Do you think I don't know that you came out to talk about your depression because of its effect on the public, but still, has anyone said anything to you about that? Or do you feel that it's important to have people of your kind of stature, politicians, celebrities in general? How do you feel about that? Do you wish there were more?
I do wish there were more. And I'll tell you that if you dig back through my social media feed, going back to shortly after my wife died, I've been very open about my struggle. I'm very open because I believe in what I said in my testimony. I believe in healing loudly. If you look at the recovery world, and I'm not an expert in it, but I did teach trauma recovery yoga for 2.5 years in an alcohol and addiction recovery facility. I got to know those people, and I got to realize that they were just like me, in that they were in recovery. And I'm in recovery from a very traumatic mental health episode, a very traumatic event. And, part of the way I understand it, part of the AA program is finding that place where you can help others. And I've believed all along that if more of us healed loudly, we would be, the stigma attached to mental health care would shrink. And as far as my colleagues have been very supportive. My peers, let's say, other elected officials, I've had at least one come up and tell me that they were moved by my testimony and that they're finally finding the strength to be open and honest about their own struggles with mental health. And for my constituents, I was a little concerned, because the old conservative mindset didn't set in. I've got a big piece of my district is near Nellis Air Force Base, and a lot of retired veterans and stuff. And no, I haven't got a negative one yet. I've gotten ones that, Max, I sure wish that this would have been in place 10 years ago. Maybe my brother, who was a veteran, wouldn't have committed suicide if there would have been an effective treatment for PTSD. And I've gotten a lot of comments in that line. And that, thank God, we're finally bringing this in the open and talking about it instead of, being embarrassed or ashamed about our own mental health struggles.
Do you think there's a pressure out there to be a head in a blue suit, that everyone's supposed to be perfect, walking up and down the hallways and shaking hands?
I wouldn't know, because I've never felt that, and it's probably because I don't want to feel that. I've been 100% me. I don't know any other way to be. All of my bills I'm carrying, when I present, there's a personal side to it, and I'm a little emo on every one of them, I think. And that's just me, because that's what I got left. I served my career as a union organizer and a business agent, was Mad Max. I was the guy that could make things happen and get stuff done. If somebody needed to be told the truth and plumbed up, they'd send Max out. And everybody used to tell my wife that, how do you put up with that asshole? Mad Max drives us crazy, and he may be, and all of this stuff. And she always told him, you guys don't know Max. And now she was very possessive of my heart, so to speak. And now I've dedicated myself to being the person that was Karen's husband 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so people that meet me now, they don't get to meet Mad Max. Mad Max was somebody who did what he had to do to make a living, to help move forward the agenda of the labor movement, and it was productive, and I'm not ashamed of a single thing. I did a lot of good things, but I was always that emo, caring, loving human being at home. And now I can be that person all the time.
Thank you for being just so so honest and passionate about what you do. And, my father had his own story. His family were survivors of Hiroshima. And so he spent a lot of his life campaigning for, the anti-nuclear movement. And a lot of people called him mad. He was out there collecting signatures. He collected 100. His goal was to collect 100,000 signatures and send it to the United Nations. They have a committee there, an anti-nuclear committee. So he got it. He got his 100. He was stopping people in the streets and, on TV, getting those signatures, and he finally did. And so when you have a cause, it's really amazing to see these people like yourself that are passionate, and you can really affect a lot of other people. So thank you. But to go back a little bit to just for my listeners, you were a union organizer for a few decades, or can you just talk a little bit?
No, I was a union organizer for about 5 years and a business agent for about 12 or 15 years. I've been a trustee also for over 20 years on my union's health plan. So I've negotiated health contracts. I know both sides, and I know that I was lucky in that when my wife passed away, I called one of the head people with behavioral health options, our mental health provider, and I was able to get into a top-notch therapist 2 weeks after my wife died. Most people don't have that kind of access, sadly. The thing is most of my union brothers and sisters have that kind of access also, if they'll just call one of us, one of the trustees, or we do have a good relationship with our mental health providers, and we can get our members in. But it's sad that not everybody has that kind of access.
I think there's a lot of stigma as well. People afraid their boss might find out or something.
100%. And I got to be careful now because I got a son who's active duty, but it's well known in the military, and this is kind of sideways, that if you got a problem, you go talk to the pastor because he can't tell your boss. If you talk to mental health, your boss is going to find out. Does that happen in the private world? I don't think so, but there is still that stigma, and that's why, one of my proud accomplishments as the chairman on our trust fund was getting our own primary care clinics put in. And last year we hired our own MFT that works for us so that our members don't have to go activate a referral. Their primary care physician can walk them down the hallway and introduce them to a therapist. And when we first started, we were sharing that therapist with the Clark County Firefighters Clinic. And I'd had a talk with, and I can't remember his name, it was on a TIP call, trauma intervention program call, because I'm a volunteer for them also, but with a firefighter that headed up one of their wellness units. And he was all excited that was going to happen because he knows his fellow firefighters, they won't say, I'm going to see my therapist, but they will say, I'm going to the clinic. So by going to the clinic, they could go to their therapist. It takes that stigma away. But by more and more of us healing loudly, that stigma is finally getting chipped away at.
Mm-hmm. And you're originally from Las Vegas.
I'm third generation. Yes, ma'am. I grew up on the east side of Las Vegas, raised my sons on the east side of Las Vegas, and now live and represent the east side of Las Vegas.
And what made you run for office all of a sudden, or was it something you'd been thinking about for a long time?
I hadn't thought about it at all. I'd been approached probably a decade ago and said no. And, and it's another mental health story. This seat came open and some friends in the labor movement come and talk to me about it. And I said no. But the more I thought about it, they caught me at a time when I had just completed, 6-8 months before, a cycle of EMDR, actually equine-assisted EMDR. And it finally released me. It took 4 years, but it finally released me from that hypervigilant state, that state of constantly ruminating on the woulda, shoulda, couldas. And my brain had finally decided to let go of that thanks to therapy, EMDR. And I'd finally decided that life was worth living again. And this was an opportunity to give back. I've said all along, I believe in service, and we're not here to talk about the other stuff I do, but this is a way to expand what I see as a life of service to a bigger group, more of my community.
What did you do with this equine EMDR?
Well, I had said that assuming that you knew what EMDR is.
Well, I just wanted you to explain it for my listeners, but you went to some equine, that's a horse, right? I mean, how does that?
Yes. So EMDR is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It's a therapy modality that is highly effective with reducing triggers and helping with PTSD, helping nip the sources of panic attacks and anxiety attacks in the bud. And it, for my personally, you look at it and you go, oh, this is crazy, but it works. So the program I went through was equine assisted. So I did it in an arena with my buddy, Nathan, the horse. And Nathan provided not only the stability and the security, that the anchor to the here and now with his presence, but there were things where he helped expand the understanding of what we were working on through EMDR. And, my one example on that one is I was dealing with a lot of problems in my head. I didn't realize it, about feeling guilt and feeling I was being judged because I was very stoic when my wife fell. I was very stoic the whole time. My sons tried to put me in the ambulance. I wouldn't do it. I went in very calmly, changed my clothes, got my book, and drove calmly to the trauma center. And I was feeling guilty because if there's any time I should have been a screaming Mimi, was when the love of my life was dying. And I wasn't. And in my head, I was judging myself for that. And we couldn't quite get that trigger knocked down. And the equine therapist with Tranquility Ranch, Laura Higgins. She's like, well, Max, why don't you take Nathan for a walk? And I did. She goes, okay, unhook him and let Nathan go free. And I did. And what did Nathan do? He did what he always does. He walked around, found a likely spot, flopped down and rolled in the dirt, and then got back up and shook it off. And she goes, so what we just see there, Max? And I says, well, Nathan being Nathan. We know that. Every time you turn Nathan loose, and most horses, they're going to go wander around, find some place to roll. She goes, do you see the connection here? And it was like a light bulb went off, that I was being true to my nature. Just like Nathan was being true to his nature, I was being true to my nature. That's stoic is how I've always been. And so there was that self-judgment wasn't true, because I didn't behave odd. I behaved the way I always do. And that was what the equine portion brought to it, that deeper understanding of what we were working on.
Was Nathan your horse or her horse?
Nope, that's her horse. Like I say, Tranquility Ranch, arguably the best equine therapy group in Las Vegas. I'd actually found them because of my work with Trauma Recovery Yoga. One therapist that used to be head of the Vegas Strong Resiliency Center, Terry Keener, and Laura Higgins, were working on blocking out how they were going to work this program. They had just gone through a big training program, and I volunteered to go help them do, just kind of block out how they were going to do it. And it hit me, why isn't this good for me? And I had a talk with my therapist, and she goes, Max, I've been waiting for you to discover EMDR. I says, why didn't you say something? She says, because you needed to discover it on your own. And I knew you would. And I did. And it was transformational.
There was a therapist there leading you through the EMDR, and then the horse was just there.
So there would be me, the horse, the EMDR therapist that was doing the EMDR, and the equine therapist we were all together the whole time. Usually would start with a bonding exercise, a join up, which is a common tool in equine therapy, where you walk and the horse will fall in on your shoulder. And I was thinking that the main reason the horse was there was to provide that anchor, because, EMDR, you're asked to try to keep one foot in the present while you're stepping into a mental image of a traumatic event. And Nathan helped be that anchor that kept me partially in the present and that I could always come back to.
So were you riding Nathan or?
Nope. Walking with Nathan. And when we would start the EMDR process, the process, usually I'd be leaning on Nathan's back or stroking his nose, and it was just that calming influence. But then I experienced how that it could also expand the understanding of what was going on.
It didn't bring back bad memories?
No. It did not. And the reason you asked that, obviously, is because that's how my wife died. She fell from her horse. And no, I never once blamed Nathan. Not Nathan. William, that's my wife's horse's name, William the mare. And William, she's still happily living at my house. It was not her fault. We still don't know what happened. And so, no, I did find out that it brought up some painful memories that we worked on that I didn't think I had, but no, it wasn't a big trigger.
So how many years have you been trying with the antidepressants and the equine therapy and the ketamine? Would you say it's that you've been battling this depression for 5-6 years, or has this been a lifelong issue?
So 6 years on, my wife died 6 years ago. Okay, I realize now that I probably have dealt with depression my whole life. I grew up in a very abusive household and violently abusive household. And that I recognize now from looking at it that I found the best drug in the world at 21, and that was a good partner. that stabilizing influence in my life that was there every day, that was reliable, that was non-judgmental. Karen was my medicine that helped make all of that ugliness okay. But I dealt with depression. I'd been on antidepressants off and on most of my life. But when she died, not only the traumatic way she died, but also that stabilizing influence was gone. And, one thing would help a little bit, and then it wouldn't. And then another thing would help a little bit, and it wouldn't. And like a lot of people, I tried getting off antidepressants and ended up 6 months later going back on them after a very ugly episode. I'm involved, like I said, I really work on self-regulation, being able to bring myself back down and teaching others to do that through trauma recovery yoga. That was one step. A lot of work with my therapist, antidepressants, but finding the right antidepressants. And then moving into EMDR. EMDR is when it finally started feeling like, okay, something's happening to not just cover up, not just treat the symptoms, but to work on what was really going on inside of me. And ketamine has been an extension of that.
This yoga that you've mentioned a few times, this sounds fascinating. So tell me a little bit more about it. You did the yoga, you taught the yoga. What is the trauma yoga about? Can you walk me through that a little bit?
So trauma recovery yoga was founded in Las Vegas by a woman who's now is a dear friend of mine, Joyce Bozen. She's a Gold Star mom, meaning that she lost her son. Her son in 2012, active duty Navy, on liberty on his birthday in Norfolk, Virginia, somehow ended up underneath a train and his legs got cut off. And he lived 9 days and she had to unplug him. And just like everybody out there listening is imagining, she buried herself in everything you can imagine, primarily like Xanax and stuff like that, numbed out and realized she couldn't keep living like that. Because she is a Gold Star mom, she was getting treatment out at the VA hospital in Las Vegas. She had been an Ashtanga yoga instructor, which is a very intense form of yoga. She tried going back to it because she knew that that's where the healing was. And she would get triggered in every class. They'd put on music that would trigger and she'd bolt. They'd come over in yoga. They like to do physical adjustments. And she'd get touched and, startled and hypervigilant, and she'd run out of the room. So she thought that yoga failed her. She started practicing on her own at home and removing those triggers, taking out the music, taking out the incense, taking out the low lighting. And she started getting better. And her doctor out there asked her, "What are you doing? You're getting better. What's happening?" And she told the doctor, and one thing led to another. And then she's teaching in the PTSD unit to cranky old Vietnam vets, and it's helping. And she worked with her partner in her life, who's now her husband, Darwin, and one of the psychologists out there who at the Veterans Hospital in Las Vegas, and developed a program and got it certified. I taught in an addiction facility. You have to have that certification to teach in the VA hospital in Las Vegas. I've taught in mental health institutions. I've taught on Army bases. My son, who's active duty, is certified in it and uses trauma recovery yoga as his active recovery day when he's working on increasing soldiers' fitness scores. And but no, it's a program that now has gone actually nationwide, not nationwide, international. There's a woman who went through the training here, became a trainer herself, and is now teaching. She started off with Yazidi refugees in Iraq from the war in Syria. And now she's got an army of refugee women in the Middle East teaching yoga to people to help them heal from trauma.
If I were to go to a class,
Yes.
tell me a little bit about what I would find. The lights are on, there's no music, there's no incense, it's not 150 degrees, or what do you do exactly in the class?
Exactly. And it's set up with the teacher in front. The teacher practices with you. It doesn't tell you how to practice. It's permissive. One of the first things I say, and I teach every Sunday on Instagram and Facebook at 5:00, mostly so I can keep myself in a good place while session's going on. And one of the first things it will say is that, if you choose to just sit here and breathe, you too are doing yoga. And that's the absolute truth. And it's very permissive. You're invited to take and do this, but there's nothing challenging about it. It avoids vulnerable poses. We start off by pointing out the exits to where to where you're not worried about, how do I get out of here if I need to leave? And it's acknowledged. And I'll tell you that acknowledged that, hey, it's okay to bolt if you need to. I think it makes people not bolt because now they know it's okay. And so it's very deliberate. It's a full-on yoga practice. You get a little bit of a sweat, but it also focuses on keeping the mind occupied. So we micro cue. We talk through the whole practice, describe every movement as we're doing it with you. And then instead of a silent meditation during Shavasana that's traditional at the end of yoga, we do a guided meditation, either a loving kindness meditation or a body scan meditation, to where we're still, that the traumatized brain will take silences and fill it with false narratives. So we keep the chatter going in order to let the brain relax and calm down and just heal. It's all based in the science, and that's what's so amazing. Yoga, EMDR, ketamine therapy, they're all focused on facilitating the scientifically proven process of neuroplasticity, getting your brain to allow itself to make sense of what's going on, subtly rewire itself, make new connections within your brain. And the way I like to look at it is anytime you can get into a neuroplastic state, you're allowing your brain to take those jumbled up images and occurrences that don't get filed in the right place when you're going through a traumatic incident, and put them in the proper file to where they don't come up at places where you don't expect them, which that's exactly what a trigger is. It's when a memory comes back in a place where you're not expecting it, and it surprises you and triggers you, and it helps your brain heal from that.
So in this yoga class, how is it different from stretching? Do you say things like move your leg out to your right leg to the left?
No, we talk through, we don't use Sanskrit, but it's like, okay, we're going to take and lower down into a low push up into upward dog, push back into downward dog with your head between your shoulders, your sit bones pointing at the ceiling. Doesn't matter if your knees are bent or not. That's okay. That's why yoga is a practice, not a perfection. That type of talk. We talk through going into down dog. We talk through going into warrior two. We talk through, moving through into a butterfly pose. So it's a full-on yoga practice, but done in a deliberate way that is very welcoming and open and permissive. Like I say, if you just want to sit there and breathe, that's great.
So there's no talk about kind of reimagining. I'm trying to figure out where the trauma part comes in. It's just the physical.
The trauma part comes in with letting your brain let go of all of the chatter. And I'll tell you that, and I say that, I didn't find yoga till after my wife died. And I still don't know why I walked into that class at the old VFW hall in the scary part of Vegas. And I can call it that because I grew up there, Bonanza in Main Street, Bonanza and Las Vegas Boulevard. And I walked in and I sweated. I felt awkward. I literally fell over. And then all of a sudden they do guided meditation. And that hamster that had been running on that wheel in my head nonstop with the woulda, shoulda, couldas, stepped off the wheel and took a nap for a few minutes. And that's what made me come back. And it became the only reason that I left the house except to go to work for about 6 months, because I could get a little bit of peace to where my brain could take a breather and start to process all of the bad stuff that was going on inside my head.
And so you do it now, you teach it now on Instagram and Facebook on Sundays at 5 p.m.?
Yep. Try Yoga with Max. And you can see if you tune in on there, you'll see I'm very, very vulnerable and very open there also. Because it's another way to spread that mantra of healing loudly. It's been a while, but a couple of years ago, I was teaching on a Sunday evening from a park in Oceanside, California, on the anniversary of my wife and I's anniversary, August 9th, and had a complete and total breakdown right there during a live session, but was able to pull it back together and complete the practice. I've had that happen to me twice and embarrassed me. And both times, my therapist, when I saw her the next time, she goes, "Max, that was great." I go, "What do you mean that's great?" She goes, "I don't watch your stuff, but I heard about it. There were others that saw it in the mental health community. And the fact that you were that vulnerable gives other people permission, and please keep it up." It wasn't intentional. Who would ever intentionally break down live on camera? But it happens, and it's real life. It's not the movies. It's real life.
Well, that's just really compelling, I have to say, that you continue to do that. Here's a question I had about the unions, since you are such an expert in them. What role do you think they can play in kind of moving forward in improving the mental health of the people of Las Vegas? You mentioned some interesting concepts about having a primary care clinic, and people can say, well, I'm just going to the clinic. They don't have to say what they're going to do there, who they're going to see. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, being like John Fetterman, the leaders of these unions need to be not be afraid to admit that they have real life issues also. And I started that. I was very open while I was still working about my struggles, and it almost became, well, when somebody would lose somebody, they'd come to talk to Max because they knew that I would listen and help them find the right people to talk to. And it slowly became even more to where people trusted because I was open. And we need more people to be open and honest about it.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much for all of your time and everything you do. I just want to come give you a hug after all this. I will the next time I see you, but your story really is compelling. And I think it's the personal stories that really resonate with people, not just the facts and the the facts, the figures and all the data and the numbers of the bills, but the bills that you're working on, I think, are really important. The SB 242 and the one with the medical or the debt collectors.
AB 223, and yes. And that's what I'm trying to do. Is most of my bills are about helping people and people that end up being marginalized. I've also got one, AB 407, that makes it to where the DMV has to require a court order or a subpoena to release personal information about holders of driver's authorization cards, which generally means that they're undocumented. And everybody deserves respect in our community. And we all need to fight for respect for everybody in our community.
That was Las Vegas Assemblyman Max Carter, District 12, talking about his life as a politician and his struggles with mental health. You have been listening to No Stigma Nevada, an original podcast where Nevadans can listen to and learn about issues of mental health in the Silver State. Join us on our next episode as we talk about and address important issues of the day. If you have any comments, story ideas, or would like to be interviewed, my contact information is on my website at nostigmanv.net. That's one word, nostigmanv for Nevada.net. If you are experiencing a mental health crisis, please call our national hotline at 988.